I was first introduced to the attachment model stuff back in 2007, and it was, eye-popping, oh wow, I can so see that, but there didn't seem to be a lot practical you could do with it other than just know, oh, this is how I'm uniquely screwed up. And so I wasn't really sure what to do with that. And so when I found this chapter in Paul Heller's material, I was like, that is so perfect, so helpful. So just a quick reminder, attachment foundation that we're working off is that God created us both with the desire and the need for secure attachment with one another and with Him. And that God is a relational community, and that's why attachment is so important, because we are His image bearers. But that sin, both sin we do and sin done against us, destroys secure attachment. The good news, however, is that we can learn secure attachment skills. And the more we learn the skills, the more securely attached we become. Okay? And so Diane Poole Heller, in her book, has 12 secure attachment skills. And they're in your workbook, but don't anybody stress, because I'm going to throw them up initially just to walk us through the total 12. You don't have to get them all written down the first time, all right? We'll go through them slowly one by one. But I wanted to just walk through the 12 of them first. So her 12 skills are listen deeply, practice presence, attune, engage and join attention, maintain contact, be mindful of comings and goings, use your eyes, play, unautomate, repair, build and expand your resources, and attend to the good. So let's backtrack and let's walk through them one by one. All right, the first one is listen deeply. And so I want to read a section from her book. She says, let's start with one of the most obvious skills. We all know the value of listening. But most of us haven't actually taken the time to develop our listening skills in any ongoing way. When we listen deeply, reflect back to the other person, and ask questions that help us understand them, we allow the other person to inform us of what's going on with them. Not in a superficial way, but in a manner that empowers them to really dive in, feel their feelings, and express them to us until we truly get them. By listening in this way, we can provide that sense of contingency. And contingency is her word. It's kind of similar to Dan Siegel's concept of the feeling of being felt. Okay? It's that attunement. It's that connection. We can provide that sense of contingency I spoke of earlier. We are not simply listening until they take a breath so that we can jump into the conversation and say what's on our mind. Listening deeply means that we respond with considerate questions meant to foster and convey understanding. And we always give space before explaining our perspective. Okay? Listening deeply is one of the most valuable skills for building relationships. Listening to what someone is saying, even when you disagree with it, you don't have to agree with them to listen. In fact, I would say that when you disagree with someone is the time you need to really ramp up your effort at listening. Because you need to hear what they're saying, where they're coming from, what they're feeling, what they're experiencing, not be working on your rebuttal. I don't know about you, but that's a trap I fall into often. Somebody starts saying something and I disagree with it or I don't like it, and so I'm thinking about what I'm going to tell them rather than really hearing what they're saying. That happens all the time in relationships. We need to listen deeply. Okay, that means we don't defend or correct or deny even if we see it completely differently. It means to listen, to genuinely try to understand them more. Okay, one of our struggles oftentimes is that we're in conversations, and the real goal of the conversation for us is that we be understood, not that we understand. And those are night and day different places. And I think when you think of it in terms of what it means to love someone well, what's more important, to understand or to be understood? To serve another means I want to understand you, and I can't understand you if I'm not listening deeply. It means to be curious, to have a curiosity that's willing to ask questions. And, I wonder where that comes from. I wonder why you think that. Curiosity adds to a deepening of your listening. Mirroring can be a powerful tool for listening. When somebody says something, to repeat back to them what you're hearing. Okay? I hear you're saying X, Y, and Z. One of the reasons that's helpful is because many times we mishear. Something I've been saying for years that's been helpful to some at least, is it can be helpful to recognize that there's 4 points in every communication. Okay? Let me just walk you through these real simply. Point number 1 is what I'm thinking. Point number 2 is what I actually say. Point number 3 is what the other person hears. And point number 4 is how they interpret it. Now, if you think of those 4 points and the transitions between them, how much room is there for the enemy to twist things in our communication? Okay? Anybody ever have the experience of thinking something and then you say something and you realize that you didn't say very well what you were thinking? It's really bad for me because a lot of what I say gets recorded. I didn't say that. Play back the recorder. Oh, yeah, I did. Guess I did say that. Well, I didn't mean that. Well, how am I supposed to know that you didn't mean that when you said that? Okay? But then there's the twisting that sometimes happens between what we're thinking and what we say. And then there's quite often where we say something and the other person mishears a word. And I don't know about you, but the older I get, the more that seems to be happening. My hearing's fine, I promise, but that just seems to be happening more and more. Okay? But then there's that place of how I interpret it. And so listening deeply and reflecting back and building conversation into that allows you to say, what I heard you say was, and then the other person go, oh, you heard that? Oh, no, that's not what I was trying to say. And so listening deeply means moving into these spaces where we work on understanding and being able to share at a deeper level. But the most basic of these is to listen deeply. And then that leads right into her next secure attachment skill, which is to practice presence. To this, she says, listening is one of the ways we can show presence, which is one of the most important gifts we can give ourselves and others in relationships. Presence isn't a static thing, it's a way of being. Presence means showing up, paying attention, and letting the other person know we're there for them with whatever's going on. It means we do our best to put aside our own worries and concerns and be with them in an undistracted way. Okay, practicing presence requires a number of things. One, it requires us to be in our own window of tolerance. It calls us to be in a place where our central nervous system isn't going offline, going crazy. Because if we're shutting down or if we're on the other end and we're hyper aroused, guess what we're not? We're not able to be present. So many times it takes us doing something to help ourselves get grounded. Some deep breathing, a grounding exercise, appreciation. Doing something that puts me in a mental state to where I can actually be with you rather than being focused on what else is going on in my mind. Okay? Practice presence. Practice presence also requires us to get rid of distractions. I am convinced that one of the chief killers of presence in our world today is our smartphones. Because anytime we are texting, looking at Facebook or Instagram or doing anything on our phones, etc., guess how much presence we have with the people around us? Very little, if any. And the experience often is one of, yeah, okay. And there is that distraction place. Multitasking is also a huge killer of presence. Multitasking has been proven by behavioral scientists over and over that the human brain really isn't capable of it. Yeah, we find some survival things we can do in it, but when we're focused on 3 things at once and one of those things is another person, guess what? We are not really present with them. So that's why it's important to set things aside, to put them down, to pause the TV, turn off the TV, set down the cell phone, have times that are designated connection times where we remove the distractions. One of the things that I've noted, and I'm hesitant to say this because I'm on Zoom with you guys when often, especially the noon Zoom, I do have some other things I have to take care of. But it's interesting to me that on Zoom, even when somebody's looking right at the screen, right where the camera is, it's pretty easy to tell when somebody's doing something besides really listening to the Zoom call. Why? Because we're present in a different way. And purposely practicing presence builds secure attachment. Skill number 3, attune. Attunement is feeling what someone else feels, putting yourself in their shoes. It's very closely akin to empathy, but it's more about, the word attune. It means to put yourself in the same tuning, like you hit a tuning fork and you get the right pitch. It means synchronizing. It means connecting. It means that you set aside, it's part of practicing presence, but it means that you set aside what's going on in you to really pay attention to what's going on in the other person. But the reality is, attunement means becoming curious about another's experience and working to understand what they're all about, discovering them in new ways, and trying to resonate with them. So much of the time it does seem like someone's problem is pretty obvious and we can tell them how to fix it and that's going to solve it. I've seen guys offer just a little bit of pathetic attunement and it completely breaks the ice. Okay? One of my guys a few years ago when he was working on this and stuff, he got on the noon Zoom check-in one day and he said, he says, I've been working on this attunement stuff and it almost feels like, it's an Obi-Wan Kenobi Jedi move because I can attune and so much of things resolve and it doesn't cost me anything. I'm like, finally, you're starting to get it. When we attune with someone, when we recognize where they're coming from, when we're able to speak back to them, I see what you are going through. When they have that experience of feeling felt, as Daniel Siegel describes, there's a connection that takes place. There's a tension relief. There is a relaxing that often allows for growth, for change, and often for secure attachment. It also often opens the door for people to figure out what their own problem is. Okay? Anybody who's ever done anything to try to help another person has had the experience of being able to clearly see what the problem is, or at least one aspect of it. And yet, what we learn in helping people is if I tell you what your problem is and even tell you how to solve it, what's the odds of anything changing? Remotely slim. However, if I can attune with you, if I can connect with you, if I can be curious and help you go down a path where you discover what the problem is and you find a solution for it, guess what the odds of change are? They are tremendously higher. Attunement is an incredibly effective, powerful thing. And it doesn't mean that you agree. It means that you see what they are experiencing, feeling, etc. And I'll make a radical statement here. Jesus thinks attunement is more powerful than raising the dead. You know how I know that? Because of the story in John chapter 11. Jesus and the disciples have been away from Jerusalem because people are trying to kill him. And word gets to Jesus that his friend Lazarus is sick. And so Jesus waits 4 days. And then he tells the disciples, come on, we're going to Jerusalem because Lazarus is sick. Of course, Jesus knows that Lazarus is beyond sick. He's died. And so when Jesus and the disciples get there, first Martha comes out and meets him outside of the town, and the first words out of her mouth are, "Oh, Jesus, if you would have been here, our brother would not have died." And then when Jesus and his disciples get on into the village, Mary comes out, and the first words out of her mouth were, guess what? Jesus, if you would have been here, our brother wouldn't have died. So question, what do you think they'd been wrestling with among themselves for several days? Okay, now let's step back for a minute and think of it from the big picture of what Jesus is doing. Jesus comes back to Bethany knowing he's going to do what? He knows he's going to raise Lazarus from the dead. So here's Mary and Martha crying, upset about Jesus, if you would have only been here. And Jesus could have easily said, come on, don't worry about it. It's not the nail. Don't worry about it. I got it covered. But John 11:35, the verse that many of us memorized in Sunday school or summer camp for a star or a bonus because it's only 2 words. Jesus wept. Think about that for a minute. Jesus knew what he was about to do. He knew that he was about to bring a man who had been dead for 4 days out of the tomb, that it was going to be one of his greatest miracles, and that it was going to point to his true identity as the Son of God, that everyone's going to be marveling at it, except, of course, the Pharisees who are looking harder to find ways to kill him, but that's a whole other subject. And yet, what does Jesus do in that moment? He attunes with Mary and Martha. Because in that moment, it's more important to him to attune with Mary and Martha than it is to raise Lazarus from the dead. Think about that for a bit, folks. Think about what that says about how important attunement is in our relationships. But then number 4. Secure attachment skill number 4 is engage in joint attention. This one's actually is really pretty easy. It just means doing stuff together. Going for a walk, hiking, doing a puzzle, playing a game, working in the yard, working on the house, etc. It can even be as simple as sitting on the couch side by side and watching a show together can be joint attention. Now, there's different levels of joint attention, obviously. But when you do something with another person, it can build secure attachment. You're working alongside one another. And alongside is something that we especially long for. And just a quick side note there, individuals with dismissive attachment, this walking alongside, engaging in joint attention is one of the most significant things for them because it feels, side to side feels less threatening. And so engaging in something together, finding something you can do together is a great way to start building secure attachment. Skill number 5, maintain contact. Okay, now this one is especially important if you have dismissive tendencies and are married to someone with anxious tendencies. Because one of the things that happens in anxious attachment and anxious attachment struggles is that it goes back to childhood when the child didn't know whether there was going to be reconnection. So they got the joy connection, it's really good, and then mom's doing something else now, and the child doesn't know if mom's ever coming back. And so they live in this anxious place of come back, come back, come back, come back, and sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. And so with anxious attachment, when their partner, when their spouse can make some even little steps toward connecting, then the anxious one knows they're still thinking about me. Because in the anxious mind, they go to a place of out of sight, out of mind. If I'm out of their sight, I'm not on their radar, I don't matter to them. Okay? And so finding ways to make contact. A call during the middle of your day. A text that just says, hey, thinking about you. Or, how's your day going? A look, a touch. Okay, so like go back to the example of watching a show together. You know, that can be engagement in a joint attention, a joint attention. But especially to an anxious, it can feel sometimes like, are we really together? And so every once in a while, a touch, a look, a comment, just something that speaks to your partner that says, I'm here with you, makes a significant difference. Maintaining contact. I find this principle especially important in especially the early phases of betrayal trauma recovery. When the wife has an anxious attachment struggle or if the husband has a history of being very dismissive, she needs to hear from you regularly, often, frequently. She needs to know that you're on her radar because her brain goes to lots of places out of her trauma when her anxious attachment starts spinning in the places of I'm out of his mind, I'm out of his sight, so I'm out of his mind. So maintaining contact can be a huge benefit for building secure attachment. Skill number 6 is be mindful of comings and goings. When you come home and when you leave. Hellos and goodbyes. Making purposeful connection when you come home and when you leave, or when you wake up and when you go to sleep. Those are powerful tools for building secure attachment. Again, especially for those with anxious attachment. Meaning that when a spouse who has dismissive attachment makes a purposeful effort to stop what they're doing and say hello, say goodbye, make a connection, it's like gold to an anxious. I'm going to give an exercise here in a minute, or an example here in a minute, that I need to give a little disclaimer for. It's a great example, and it's absolutely true, but sometimes in betrayal trauma recovery especially, it's not possible because of the wife's struggle because of her trauma with physical touch and contact. But let me read you the example, and then we'll talk about it in that regard. Poolheller writes, she says, Stan Tacton recommends a beautiful activity called the Welcome Home exercise. Maybe you're at home making dinner and your partner comes home from a long day at work. Do this exercise. All you have to do is turn the heat down on the food, walk over to your partner, and give them a big hug. You stay in a full body, belly-to-belly embrace long enough for both of your bodies to relax and regulate. As I mentioned earlier, our nervous system is built to co-regulate. And this is a way to directly interact with another person's nervous system. You connect your two bodies and regulate with each other, which sets the tone for your time together going forward. As it turns out, when you experience another person as neurologically regulating, your body really wants to be with them. Imagine that. Okay? Now, again, let's talk about that in the context of betrayal, trauma, and recovery. Guys, if you're the anxious and your wife's the dismissive, you need to know that this is going to feel absolutely terrifying to her. And even if you're the dismissive and you're the anxious, depending upon her trauma response to physical contact, it may feel terrifying for her. So guys, it's a place where you need to synchronize to her. Okay? If she is up to that, if this sounds, for many anxious wives, even in betrayal trauma, just the description of this, they light up and say, yeah, I want that, I want that. And if that's where she's at, I highly encourage it. If she's not in that place, if it is a scary thing for her, then adapt it. Find what does it look like in the coming and the going for me to demonstrate to her that I'm glad to be with you. It might be just a very clear, hello, I'm glad to be home. It might be a holding of her hand or a side hug. But creating rituals that make your goings and your comings times of connection rather than just times of running out of the house and onto the task. Be mindful of your comings and goings. They make a huge difference. Skill number 7 is use your eyes. Again, she writes, in my work, we often refer to the attachment gaze or the, quote, beam gleam. This means using eye contact to impart a feeling of kindness and receptivity to others, or receiving the same from them, or both at the same time. It's a look that says, you're special to me, or you're amazing, or I love you. Okay? Looking at your spouse in a way that expresses your care. Now, here's a reality that I hope you're picking up on from the earlier discussion on joy and it being authentic. You can't fake it. You can't throw your spouse a googly eye when you're angry at them. It's not going to work. No matter how hard you try, it's going to look like those pictures, where everybody's smiling and you can tell by the picture that nobody's really smiling. Okay? However, here's something you can do. While joy cannot be created, it can be awakened. Okay, let's just think about this for a minute. I think everybody in here, when they're in their genuine self, truly likes their spouse. Now, there may be a lot of things about them that you're really hurt about, angry about, etc., but there's things about them, about their core nature, that you genuinely love. And so one of the things that you can do in order to be able to offer those looks and use your eyes is to reset your brain. Okay? So an exercise I've been giving my guys for many years now is what I call a two-stage appreciation. I tell my guys that, okay, when you're on your way home, do a two-stage appreciation. Okay? And the two-stage appreciation starts off by just doing a general appreciation. It's the exercise we've been doing. Ask Jesus to remind you of something you could appreciate. It can be something from nature. It can be dessert. It can be, the lack of traffic today, whatever it may be. Use the first stage appreciation as, in essence, warming your brain up, softening the soil, so to speak. And then the second stage of appreciation is ask Jesus to remind you of something about your spouse that you can appreciate. You say, well, I just want to be efficient. I'll just skip to the second part. Well, guess what will often happen if you try to start with appreciation for your spouse? Well, as soon as your spouse comes into your mind, the first thing that rattles is all the ways they're irritating you at the moment. And so then your brain starts spiraling down that rabbit hole, and guess what happens to your beam gleam? It becomes another kind of gleam. Okay? But if you start with a general appreciation, it's a ramping up. The general appreciation helps turn your brain on, helps get you in a better state. And then when you ask that second stage and say, okay, Jesus, remind me of something about my spouse, you may be shocked at what all starts coming into your mind. And guess what happens if you have just had an appreciation about your spouse when you pull in the house and walk in the front door? Then you're naturally going to communicate your gladness to be with them. And then if you combine this and use your eyes and make a deliberate effort, you are even that much more likely to make a good connection. Use your eyes. Just remember, you can't fool your eyes. But also remember, you can awaken delight. You can awaken joy. Can't fake it, but you can awaken it. Skill number 8, she writes, is play. Question: how much instruction do we have to give to small children to play? My granddaughter is 6, and guess what she does as soon as she walks in the door? Actually, probably in the car with Grandma on the way home. She's playing. She's already making stuff up. She is in play mode because that's the job of children, is to play. And somewhere along the way, we've been taught, conditioned, etc., that playing is not for adults. Hogwash. Play is one of the most beneficial things we can do in life. It's been shown in research project after research project that learning happens much better in play, that so many different things happen in play. And one of the struggles that most couples get into, especially when kids come along, is we just get in the rat race of all the tasks, all the work, everything that has to be done, and we forget to play together. And yet, when we play together, we connect at a different level. Obviously, connections back to joint attention, but let yourself be silly. Find ways of doing things that get you out of your typical, this is how we've always done it. Find new experiences so that you can go and get out of your comfort zone and laugh together. Laughter is a powerful, powerful drug of connection. Yeah, maybe I'll use that term. Play. Which also then leads into number 9. Unautomate. What does she mean by unautomate? It means get out of your routines. Okay? Anybody ever have the experience of getting to work and then thinking, I don't remember driving here today? You know, we just get in autopilot and we just go through life doing things that we've done before. Now, what you need to understand is that is a very efficient use of brain power. It's part of how we're designed. We do automate things so that it requires less energy for us. Problem, however, comes when we automate our relationship. When we just continue to go through the motions, doing the same thing the same way every day, etc., etc. We need to step out of that and make conscious, deliberate decisions about what we're doing rather than just doing what we've always done. Unautomate. And then number 10, maybe the most important one on our list, I believe, is repair, repair, repair. John Gottman followed newlyweds for 6 years. And at the end of 6 years, here's one of the things they found. He said the couples that stayed married practiced repairing ruptures in their relationships 86% of the time. Whereas those who divorced turned toward each other to repair only 33% of the time. See the difference? Okay, every relationship is going to have ruptures. I've said for many years, if a couple tells me they agree on everything, then I ask, okay, which one of you stopped thinking? All right? The reality is, folks, we all married an alien. Okay, let's think that through for a minute. Every single one of us who is married an alien. And what I mean by that is they grew up in a completely different world, completely different perspectives, and no matter how much we thought we were like them, as soon as we started sharing a bathroom, a bed, a house, finances, marriage, etc., we started finding out, wow, you think like an alien. Because they come from a completely different world. Every single person is that way. That's part of why I think, Paul talks about the mystery of becoming one flesh. And one flesh there means much more than just the sexual union. The reality is, couples come together from such different perspectives. And we're going to clash. We're going to, my junk is going to stir up your junk. And no place does that more than marriage. In fact, I believe marriage is the single hardest thing we do in life. And that's true when betrayal trauma isn't part of the equation. So guess how much harder it gets when betrayal trauma is part of the equation. Okay? So we have to learn to do repair. Because we are going to have ruptures. But not only is it critical, it's also incredibly empowering for the relationship. Do you realize that ruptures that have been repaired are stronger than no rupture at all? Relationships that go through rupture and then do the hard work of building repair are always stronger than if the rupture had not happened. Repair is incredibly powerful. However, one big problem that we often have with repair is that many of us have not learned the skill of giving a good apology. Some of us don't even know what a good apology looks like. Trust me, I've seen people in my office give really pathetic ones, and I'm sure people have seen me give really pathetic ones. But it can be helpful to think of 4 R's of a good apology. All right? And I put those up here. 4 R's of a good apology: recognition, responsibility, remorse, and reparation. Okay, let's just walk through those. A good apology starts by recognition. In the video, I see you're really upset. I see that, that you're hurting right now. It's a recognition that a rupture has happened. Okay? Then the second part that follows close with that is the taking of responsibility. I see that you're upset, and I know I created this. Okay? The disclosure process that we do, and that many of you have been part of, that's what this is about. It's about recognition of the harm that's been done. It's about taking responsibility. I created this mess. Okay? And then third is remorse. That's the I'm sorry. I wish I hadn't have done that. I want to learn better tools to not continue to harm you in this way. Okay? And then the 4th R is the reparation. Okay? Now, this sometimes can get twisted or go too far. There are many harms that are done that we can never repay. Okay, I tell my guys all the time in betrayal trauma, deceptive sexuality, you can never earn your way back. That you could love your wife better than anyone has ever loved anyone before, and it would never equal the harm that you've done in the betrayal and the deceptions and the intentionally manipulated reality and all the harm that's been done. So reparation isn't about, I've harmed you $10,000 and I'm paying you $10,000 back, especially in the context of betrayal trauma. There is not enough that we can pay back. But there are still principles of reparation that come to play. There are principles like, what am I going to do to lessen the likelihood of me causing harm? There's principles of, what am I doing in order to learn new, better responses to you? Okay, now let's move out of the betrayal trauma. Let's take it back into more normal, everyday life. Okay? Sometimes reparation means, what does your partner need to feel like you've processed through a rupture? Okay? If I'm the one who's created the rupture, then I need to step back and think, okay, what can I do to help my spouse, help my partner, help the person that I'm in relationship with? What would feel like repair to them? So here's where we have to get out of our natural tendency is we want to love our partner the way we want to be loved, rather than loving them the way that feels loving to them. See how those are 2 very different places? So maybe for your partner, what feels like repair is a hug. So if I've done the harm and we're working through it, then maybe a reparation is me offering, hey, could we have a hug? Now, if you're the anxious and one usually demanding the hug, guess what? That's not reparation. That's you trying to get your way, so to speak. All right? But a good apology takes in all those things into play. A really good book on this subject is by Molly Howes with the very basic title of A Good Apology. She goes and looks through lots of examples in public sphere and private spheres of apologies and kind of breaks them apart, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And by looking at that, you can gain better skills for how do I say I'm sorry in a way that goes beyond saying I'm sorry. Okay, so like for example, another thing. In the disclosure process, one of the things we ask wives is, do they want an apology during the disclosure process? And the reason we ask that question is because many men have been saying, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, for so long that their sorry means nothing. And so it's not about the words, though the words are important, but it's also about how have I functioned in our ruptures throughout our relationship. Because if you say you're sorry, but you never make any changes, where does that leave the other person? So a good apology not only has an I'm sorry, but it has that sense of, and this is what I'm going to do to try to learn to break these patterns. And a good apology is also, it's important to note, that find how your partner wants to receive it. You know? Does it need to be spoken out loud? Some couples, some wives really likes an apology written out, and that speaks to them. Some people see a written apology and go, well, I don't know if they really meant that. Find what speaks to your spouse's heart and use that in the reparation stage. Repair, repair, repair. And then number 11, build and expand your resources. It's part of what you're doing here this weekend. Find opportunities to learn new ways to deal with your own story and new ways to relate to your partner. This is one of those opportunities. Build and expand your resources. Okay? Find ways to increase your joy capacity so that you have more to give. Okay, again, here's another reason why, the men's groups have been so beneficial through the years. Is I've heard guys say, well, I just want to make things okay with my wife. Well, the problem is, if that's your only focus, you're going to keep doing what you've done in the past. But by attending a men's group, by building those relationships, by raising your joy capacity in that context, guess what you end up taking home to your wife? More capacity. Okay, an analogy I came up with years ago when I first did my Power of Joy series is that of a 5-gallon bucket. So I want you to imagine a 5-gallon bucket filled with water. Okay? Now if you can imagine the water level there, that whatever that water level is, that represents your joy capacity. And you can handle as much pain as you have joy capacity and still function well. But whenever your pain gets greater than your joy capacity, you go into trauma and you go into survival mode. In survival mode, guess what you do? Whatever you got to do. Okay? And so one of the realities in recovery, one of the realities in recovery is that we all come into our relationships with a different starting level of capacity to begin with. So if you grew up in a very nurturing, caring family of origin, you might have 3 or 4 gallons of joy in your bucket to start with. If you grew up in a family where nurture and care was very desolate and you were on your own and you were isolated, you might have 8 ounces in your joy bucket to start with. Okay, we all start in different places. But then magnifying that is, guess what? All our buckets leak. We've all got holes in our buckets. Every trauma that we've ever experienced has blown a hole in our bucket. And big traumas have blown bigger holes. And so we've all got these buckets that are leaking, and when our capacity gets lower than our pain, we start being addicts. We start lashing out, or we start acting out, or we start doing whatever we can to avoid the pain. So guess what you can do? We got a leaky bucket. Imagine that 5-gallon bucket with holes all over the place. What happens if you put that bucket under a water faucet and have the water turned on? Well, it's spewing water everywhere, but what's happening to the capacity? It's staying high. Okay? I use that as an example of what happens when men plug in to like our recovery group, and especially guys who come to group in person, once or twice a week, and then do Zoom group 3 or 4, do a Zoom check-in 3, 4, 5 times a week. It's like they're underneath the faucet and they're constantly getting their bucket topped off. And so they're leaking like crazy, but they're building their capacity at the same time. And so while they're building their capacity, and while their capacity is staying full by the connection they're receiving from brothers in recovery, guess how they're treating their wife? Not perfectly, but better than they were. Okay? It's critical for us to build and expand our resources, because none of us have enough to begin with. All right? And especially if we've had betrayal trauma, addiction, deceptive sexuality as part of our story, then there's an obvious reality that we did not bring enough joy capacity in to begin with. Or if we brought it in to begin with, something happened and we lost a tremendous amount, or we wouldn't have harmed the one we love that way. And so when we recognize that I come into this relationship from a depleted place, and guess what? My spouse cannot fill me up. And I think that's one of the greatest illusions that American culture has about dating and finding your soulmate, et cetera, is that, that Jerry Maguire line, you complete me. Okay? That place of, here I am, I'm a half of a person and you're a half of a person, and together we make a whole. Well, sorry folks, it's not addition, it's multiplication. Half and a half come together and now you got a fourth and you got a really big mess. Okay? And so the reality is I need to recognize that God calls me to love my wife, not use my wife. That means that God calls me to recognize that I can't give what I don't already have. So if I come into my relationship and I am borderline on empty, guess what I'm going to do with my spouse? I'm going to be demanding that they fill my bucket. Well, that's not love. That's a form of using. But instead, when we can learn how to put ourselves in context and communities where we are being filled up. And just a quick side note here, folks. The Emmanuel process and encountering Jesus and allowing God to fill our bucket is one of the most powerful ways of increasing our joy capacity. And I say that with a little hesitation because many then will spiritualize that and say, well, then what I need is just to work all this out with Jesus. Well, there's some truth to that. But my experience is that Jesus often wants help from other fallen, broken people like the rest of us here. And so it's a process of engaging Jesus and engaging others and learning and finding resources, books to read, events to go to, experiences to have that build and expand our resources. And then 12th, she has a tend to the good. What she means by that is take time to focus on and appreciate the good things that are in your life. Now, please understand this is not about denying or pretending that everything was or is wonderful. It's not about, living in la la land and pretending that problems don't exist. But it is about slowing down and working against our brain's negativity bias. Our brains have a tendency to focus on what is negative, what is painful, what is broken. And so it is very helpful to make conscientious efforts to focus on things that are good. It's one of the reasons appreciation is such a powerful exercise. It's why appreciation is one of the 6 dailies in our recovery program for our men. Okay? Find something good every day to think about, to focus on. Paul says it this way in Philippians 4, 8, and 9. He says, finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. Okay? Think about such things. There is good that happens inside of us when we focus on what is good. Bert Thompson, I don't remember if it's his Soul of Shame or Soul of Desire. I think it's Soul of Desire. He talks about assigning to a client just to go sit in a museum and stare at this particular piece of art for hours. And when I read that, I was thinking, man, that would just be torture for me. Okay? And I don't know if I could do it, but it would probably be beneficial for me as well. And his point was that as you sit and soak in and take in beauty, good things happen in our soul. Now, I'll tell you, I don't know I could do it in a museum, but I do it every time I go to the mountains. Every time I am in a place where I can just step back and be in awe of God's glory at His creation. And finding places where you can do that is especially helpful.